Hey guys, welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Sam Basher, and today I'm talking about one of the more divisive films of the MCU, Iron Man 3. While this movie does have a fairly decent Rotten Tomatoes score, fans are still pretty split on it. For me, my opinion didn't change on the rewatch. I actually really enjoyed this film. My opinion doesn't matter right now. I'm here just to deliver you guys those juicy Easter eggs. Here's your spoiler warning for comic book Easter eggs for Iron Man movie Easter eggs, MCU Easter eggs. Anyways, let's get started with comic book Easter eggs. Those are me favorite days. Opening in Bern, Switzerland, we meet one of the main characters from the Iron Man storyline, Extremis in the comics, which most of this movie is based on. I'm talking about Rebecca Hall's Maya Hansen character. She appeared in Iron Man Volume 4, Number 1 in January 2005, and she was created by Warren Ellis, which name does come up later in this movie, but more on that in a second. Also, it's true in this movie and in the comics that she is the creator of Extremis. Moving forward, we then bump into Ho Jensen. Yay! He made a return from Iron Man 1, if you guys remember that line from the first Iron Man movie. He mentions running into Tony Stark a few years earlier. That seemed just like a throwaway line, but it does pay off in the third and final solo Iron Man film. Also, there's a deeper cut reference to Jensen later on in this movie, but I'll get back to that in just a second. We then meet Dr. Wu, who's played by Ji Kui Wong, who actually plays a bigger role later on in this movie, but he was created originally for this film, but was later introduced into the Amazing Spider-Man comics, and also his name is a reference to the Steely Dan song of the same name. Then moving forward, we bump into our main antagonist of the film, Aldrich Killian, played by Guy Pearce. Yeah, I'm a big Guy Pearce fan, he's great. Aldrich Killian does have a pretty small role in the comics, specifically Iron Man Volume 4, Number 1, which came out in July 2005, but most of his origin was created for this film. He too popped up in the Extremis storyline, but in this film, he was adapted to be the creator of AIM. Now, originally AIM was the scientific arm of Hydra in the comics, which would eventually break off, and they get their own little suits. Here's a little flash of them. They come in yellow, blue, and red. Now, while AIM is usually a villain to many Marvel characters, they're currently a branch of the Avengers, which I think is a very interesting storyline. That will never happen in the movies, but hey, still fun. We then move forward to Hansen showing Tony her Extremis experiment, which is basically the same Extremis that we see in the comics. We then run into one of the main stars of this movie, the Mark 42 armor. Now, it is a little bit different from the design that is in the comics, which did show up a little bit after this film, but Mark 42 could be a nod to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the answer 42 being the answer to all life in the universe and everything, or it could be a mention to the 42nd idea that Tony Stark, Reed Richards, and the rest of his team were able to come up with, which was putting a prison in the negative zone to house superpowered people. Next, we meet one of Iron Man's greatest foes, the foe that's been teased for 3 films now, the Mandarin. He first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 50 in February 1964. Now, the Mandarin in this film is completely different from the one in the comics for a very good reason. Now, a lot of fans aren't happy with this twist in the film, but Marvel did have to kind of maneuver their way around a lot of racist stereotypes, so I think they did the best they could. There are some alternatives. I'd like to hear your pitches in the comments down below, or hit me up on Twitter with them. Now, I have mentioned this before, but in the original Iron Man film, he was supposed to be the main antagonist, but director Jon Favreau chose to hold off on him and kind of tease him throughout the series, but eventually that all backfired. They just threw that all out. Also worth mentioning, in the trailer for Iron Man 3, we see Mandarin take off his hood, and we see that he has a neck tattoo of the Captain America shield, but with a very important difference. I know it's a little hard to see, but if you notice that the star in the middle of the shield has been replaced with the Anarchy A symbol. Next, we run into Don Cheadle playing James Rhodes, aka War Machine, aka the Iron Patriot, who first appeared in Dark Avengers number 1 in March of 2009, so relatively a new design. Now, originally in the comics, the Iron Patriot was actually Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. Yes, how cool is that? Now, in the comics, Norman Osborn was seen as a hero because he was the one who stopped the Secret Invasion event, and then he eventually led the evil version of the Avengers specifically. And this suit was supposed to be, a reflection of Iron Man and Captain America put into one. Now, he didn't have that armor for very long, but eventually a new hero by the name of Tony Ho took up the Iron Patriot mantle, who in the comics is the daughter of Jensen. Very cool. Moving forward to when Happy and Pepper are hanging out together, you hear him talk to one of the secretaries, calling her Bambi. We actually saw Bambi in Iron Man 2. Speaking of small-time characters, we run into ERIK Savan in this same lobby, who ends up being Killian's main security guy. He actually appeared in Marvel Comics Presents numbers 26 in August 1989, and he has a completely different comic book counterpart besides both being from the military and the same name. They're totally different. And speaking of villains that are totally different outside of the Chinese theater, we meet Taggart, but in the comics there's a Taggart that's spelled T-A-G-G-E-R-T instead of A-R-T. This character actually popped up in Iron Man number 230 in May of 1989, but once again, he's very different from his comic book counterpart. Actually, Taggart in the comics is Firepower, who's an armored rival to Iron Man, and they fought several times, but he has no ties to the Extremis story, but we did get a mention of him. Then moving forward to when Tony is investigating the Mandarin, Mandarin, we see an image of a dragon in his hologram, which could be a nod to something later in the film, or this is possibly a quickie nod to Fin Fang Foom, one of the classic Marvel foes that is mentioned many times in the Iron Man films. We even saw him in a movie poster in the first movie. Then moving forward to the assault on Tony's house, we see the Iron Man armor protect Pepper. This is actually a really fun nod to the rescue armor that Pepper wore for some time in the comics. Actually, if you're reading Iron Man right now, she wears it sometimes. Hooray! But then moving forward again to our time in Tennessee, we run into Ellen Brandt, one of the small-time baddies in this film, but actually, she plays a pretty significant role in another Marvel hero's backstory, the Man-Thing. To give a quick backstory, in the origins of Man-Thing, we meet Ted Salvas, a scientist who created a super soldier-like serum formula, what have you. And after creating said formula, he's hunted down by AIM and is actually betrayed by his wife, Ellen Brandt. And as a way to escape, he injects himself with that formula, but things go wrong and he turns into this. Ugh, gross. But he does obtain a very special power to burn people who touch him, who are also feeling fear at the same time, so he does end up burning his wife on the face, and we see that Ellen Brandt in this movie has a burn on her face. Could this be a nod to Man-Thing? Just a little nod. Also fun tie-in, the Ted Salvas formula is based on a plant research project, and the Extremis formula is also based on plants in this film. But moving forward to Killian's two big dragon tattoos we see near the end of the film, there is some talk that this could be a nod to Fin Fang Foom as well, but hey, it's worth mentioning. Weirdly guys, that's as many comic book tie-ins as I could find. There are a butt ton of MCU tie-ins, so let's talk about those. Right up front, we hear Tony talking to someone.
A famous man once said, "We create our own demons,"
which we identify at the very end of the film, but more on that in a short second. In that same opening scene of this movie, we see footage of Iron Man's armor being blown up. We see the Mark V on the very left, and we see the 6, as well as the 7 and the 8, which we both saw in the Avengers films. And then moving forward, we see the Marvel title once again, the awesome comic book flip, my favorite one, as well as a Paramount title, which is one of the last films that Paramount was able to distribute for Marvel. Also coming back to Maya Hansen's character for just a second, she was actually originally supposed to be the main villain of this film, but that was eventually removed because Marvel didn't think that female villains' toys would sell. That kind of sucks, I'm gonna be honest. Moving forward, we get a quick 10 Rings logo. The 10 Rings being the terrorist group that has been in each Iron Man film, and here's their leader, the Mandarin, played by Ben Kingsley. We already talked about him. But moving forward to President Ellis. President Ellis actually isn't in the comics, but his name is a nod to the man who created the Extremis storyline, Warren Ellis. He writes some fantastic comics. If you're a fan of The Punisher and you want to read an extremely violent and gritty story, check out Punisher Max. Also just want to point out that the Iron Patriot armor is rebranded by AIM, and in Iron Man 2, the War Machine armor was rebranded by Hammer, and that didn't go so well. And also in this movie, the AIM rebrand gets hacked by AIM. Maybe have Tony just work on your armor from now on. Hey, Rhodey. Moving on to one of the main Mandarin broadcasts that we see being filmed, we get a nod to Roxxon Oil Company, one of the biggest organizations in Marvel Comics, which has appeared in every Iron Man film up until now. In the first film, you saw him in the background. In the second film, they had one of the cars in the Formula 1 race. Moving forward again, we're moving pretty quick through this film to when Killian has Tony Stark all tied up. He references Thor in a very cool way. Check it out.
Ever since that big dude with the hammer fell out of the sky, subtlety's kind of had its day.
Moving forward again, here's a fun Easter egg for Iron Man 2. The Ponytail Express captor is actually the same prisoner that was used to be switched out for Ivan Vanko. Somehow he survived and then he ended up over here. Now here's the part you're most excited about. Let's start identifying some of the Iron Man armor that shows up in the final battle. First up, we see the Iron Man Mark 17 Heartbreaker, which is the first to appear in that aerial lineup. Very cool. Then we get the Iron Man Mark 37, aka the Hammerhead, because this is actually an aquatic suit. We then get the Iron Man Mark 41 Bones design, which is the black and gold armor, which for me is my favorite design, so I'm not really sure why he made the 42. I get that it builds itself, so it's more practical, but that design is awesome. Then we meet the Proto Hulkbuster suit, Mark 38, aka Iaeger, named after the hunchback from, Frankenstein. Then there's the Iron Man Mark 35 Red Snapper, which has got the red big claw thing. Then there's the Mark 33 nicknamed Silver Centurion armor, which is really similar to the suitcase armor in Iron Man 2, which I thought was supposed to be a nod to the Silver Centurion, but hey, I'm happy if we got 2. Then I wanted to point out that the armor that picks up Rhodey is actually the Mark 17, and then we see the Mark 25, aka the Striker. That's the one with the jackhammers that hits the 2 Extremis soldiers. Then we see Stark jump into the Mark 22, aka the Hot Rod, but that's destroyed pretty quick after that one. Also, it's worth mentioning, just to take a break for a second, that when Killian gets his arm cut off, this actually is a theme that is repeated quite often in Phase 2, which I will talk about more in upcoming films. But moving back to the armors, we see the Iron Man Mark 16, aka the Nightclub suit, which is described as a stealth suit. And then we get the Iron Man Mark 40 suit, aka the Shotgun, which ejects Tony pretty quick. And then finally, Tony jumps into the Mark 15 Sneaky suit, but that one gets destroyed pretty quick upon landing. And then one of the last suits we're able to see is actually the one that targets Pepper for having the Extremis enter system. That's the Mark 8, which she's able to bring down in a really cool, badass move. Ooh, those are all the armors I was able to identify. After that, they just start blowing up. And And another shout out to Dr. Wu, which we see at the very end. He's removing the shrapnel from Tony's heart. But finally, we're able to figure out who Tony is narrating this entire movie to, and it's to his friend Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk. But finally, guys, before I leave you, let's discuss some quick pop culture references in this movie. The opening song definitely needs a nod. It's Blue by Eiffel 65. Woo, I'm a big fan of that song. Here's a clip. Next up, I just wanted to mention that Maya was originally going to be played by Jessica Chastain, but she had to drop out of the film. That would have been kind of cool for a second. Also, a fun nod to John Travolta's character in Pulp Fiction. Jon Favreau's Happy Hogan look in the 90s is supposed to be a nod to that. Then moving forward to when Tony Stark's trying on the Mark 42 suit, you hear Jingle Bells playing in the background, which is one of many nods that this is a Christmas film, which actually goes into the theme of Shane Black's movies up until now, like The Last Boy Scout and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. They usually take place during the Christmas season. You hear Stark mention that this kid looks like the kid from A Christmas Story, which is pretty fun because the kid who did play that kid in A Christmas Story was in the first Iron Man film, Peter Billingsley. He played this really tiny role right here. Fun nod during the Chinese theater fight. We actually see for just a second Robert Downey Jr.'s handprint. It's really hard to see, but it is there. I think that's a pretty fun nod to the actor. Then there's actually a really good reference to the Westworld movie we hear during this scene. Yes, Yvonne's eyes look a lot like how the robots, androids looked in that first film. Even his character kind of looks like that android. But moving forward to Rhodey saying his password for War Machine 68. 1968 is actually the year that he was born, which is pretty fun. Also, just want to give a shout out to that awesome fight where Tony's just wearing a boot and a glove from the Iron Man suit. One of my favorites. And when one of the AIM agents drops his gun and says, "Hey man, I just work here. These guys are crazy." That's actually one of Robert Downey Jr.'s stunt choreographers who worked with him on Sherlock Holmes and the other Iron Man films. Also worth mentioning that amazing sequence when Iron Man's rescuing people as they're falling out of a plane. They shot that many times using actual skydivers, so that's legit. And finally, guys, don't worry, I didn't miss it. Stanley gets this awesome cameo right here as a judge for a beauty pageant. Take back awesome, kind of creepy, but hey, it's in the movie. Those are all the Easter eggs and hidden references I was able to find. Let me know which ones were your favorite, or if I missed some, let me know in the comments down below, or on Twitter at @OnlyStupidAnswers. You ain't got the vowels from stupid. But guys, make sure you like this video, comment down below, share it with your friends who love Marvel films, and subscribe to New Rockstars for more breakdowns. There's so many. Make sure you tune in as well to New Rockstars News. I'm on that panel show. It's a whole bunch of fun. I'm Sam Basher, and I'll see you next time.